My name is Vanessa Hartwell. I am 35 years old, and I learned on Christmas night that some people can smile while doing something cruel enough to change a child forever. It was supposed to be a normal family dinner, the kind where everyone pretends old problems are buried under good food, polite laughter, and matching holiday plates. I had already spent half the evening watching my daughter sit too straight in her chair, trying to be quiet, trying to be good, trying not to take up too much space in a room where certain people always made her feel like a guest instead of family. Then the cookie tray was placed in the middle of the table. She looked at me first, like she was asking permission without words. I nodded. She reached out with two careful fingers toward a sugar cookie shaped like a little Christmas tree. Before she could touch it, my mother knocked her hand away. Not hard enough for everyone to call it abuse, just hard enough for everyone to see. Then she said, in that sweet holiday voice people use when they want cruelty to sound like manners, "Don't touch. Those are for the grandkids we're proud of." The table went still. My daughter pulled her hand into her lap and stared down like she had been caught stealing instead of reaching for dessert. Then someone laughed. A small laugh. A cowardly laugh. And that was all it took. I stood up without saying a word. I took my daughter's coat from the back of her chair, wrapped it around her shoulders, and walked her toward the front door. My sister called after me, "You're overreacting. Mom didn't mean anything by it." I did not turn around. Outside, my daughter looked up at me and whispered, "Mommy, am I not one of the good ones?" That question followed me home. It sat beside me in the dark long after I tucked her into bed. Then, at exactly 1 a.m., my phone lit up. It was my mother. "Remember, the business loan payment is due tomorrow." I stared at that message, thinking about my daughter's face, the laughter at that table, and all the years I had paid to keep people comfortable who could not even be kind to my child. Then I typed one word. No. Before I tell you what happened after I walked out, and why that one word made my family panic before sunrise, tell me what the weather is like where you are right now. Does it match the mood of this story? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this Christmas dinner travels. I barely slept that night. I kept hearing my daughter's question in the dark, over and over, like it had been whispered into every corner of the house. "Mommy, am I not one of the good ones?" By morning, I was standing in the kitchen before sunrise, still wearing the same sweatshirt I had thrown on after we got home, staring at the coffee maker like it owed me an answer. The house was quiet in that strange way it gets after something ugly happens, when all the normal sounds feel too gentle for the damage that was done. I was not thinking about Christmas anymore. I was not thinking about the ruined dinner, the untouched dessert, or the relatives who would spend the next day deciding how much of the story to repeat and how much to soften, so nobody important looked bad. I was thinking about my little girl pulling her hand back from that cookie tray like she had reached for something forbidden. A few minutes later, I heard her bedroom door open. She came into the kitchen in her snowman pajamas, her hair tangled from sleep, holding the stuffed rabbit she only carried when she was nervous. She did not ask for breakfast right away. She did not ask about her presents. She stood near the doorway and looked at me the way children look at adults when they are trying to figure out whether the world is safe again. I smiled before she could worry. I asked if she wanted pancakes, and she nodded, but she still did not come all the way into the room. Then she said very quietly, "Did I do something wrong yesterday?" I turned off the stove even though the pan was already warming. I crossed the kitchen, knelt in front of her, and took both of her little hands in mine. I told her no. I told her she did not do anything wrong by wanting a cookie. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it, but some part of her was still stuck at that table, surrounded by adults who had laughed instead of protecting her. So I said it again. In this house, you do not have to earn food. You do not have to earn kindness, and you never, ever have to earn love by being quiet. Her eyes filled for a second. But she blinked hard because she is the kind of child who tries to be brave before she should have to. I pulled her into my arms and held her there until I felt her shoulders loosen. After breakfast, I drove her to school. She was quiet in the back seat, looking out the window at the leftover Christmas lights on the houses we passed. When we pulled up to the school, she paused before unbuckling and asked if we were going back to Grandma's house later. I told her no. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. She nodded, and the relief on her face told me everything my family would later try to deny. When I got home, the silence felt different. It was not peaceful. It was waiting. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my banking app, and looked at the scheduled transfer that had been sitting there like a monthly obligation I had somehow confused with love. The business bridge loan. That was what my father had called it for almost 2 years. Temporary help, a rough patch, a cash flow problem, a family emergency. Every month, I had sent money because I thought I was helping keep the family business alive. Every month, I had told myself that being the dependable daughter meant doing the hard thing without needing praise. But now all I could see was my daughter's face. I tapped the scheduled payment, read the amount, and for the first time, I did not feel guilty. I felt awake. I canceled it. Then I took a screenshot of the confirmation, not because I planned to send it to anyone, but because I wanted proof for myself that I had actually done it. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the first text from my mother. She said I had embarrassed her. She said people had noticed me leaving. She said Christmas dinner had become uncomfortable because I refused to let a harmless moment pass. Harmless. I stared at that word until it stopped looking like English. Then my sister texted. She said I was making things bigger than they needed to be. She said my daughter was young and would forget it if I stopped reminding her. Then my father texted, and his message had nothing to do with my child at all. He said the payment needed to clear before 11. He said a vendor was waiting. He said timing mattered. Not one of them asked how Lily was. Not one of them asked if she had cried. Not one of them asked what it felt like for a 7-year-old girl to be told she was not one of the grandchildren worth being proud of. By lunch, my phone had become a courtroom, and every message they sent was another piece of evidence against the family I thought I had been saving. Calls got worse after noon. I did not answer them while Lily was at school because I already knew the voices waiting on the other end. My mother would sound wounded, my father would sound disappointed, and my sister would sound reasonable in that polished way people use when they want you to mistake betrayal for common sense. So I let the phone ring. I folded laundry. I washed the breakfast dishes. I packed away the wrapping paper from the night before. I did ordinary things because if I stopped moving, I was afraid the anger would become too big for the house. When I finally sat down at the kitchen table and listened to the voicemails, I did it with a notebook beside me. Not because I needed to write anything down, but because I needed to remind myself that this was not a family discussion anymore. It was a pattern. My mother's first message was all breath and injury. She said she could not believe I had walked out in front of everyone. She said my aunt had texted her asking whether everything was all right, and did I understand how humiliating that was for her? She said she had worked for days to make Christmas beautiful, and I had turned it into a scene. She never said Lily's name. She never mentioned the cookie. She never mentioned the sentence that had made my child shrink into herself at the dinner table. My father's voicemail came next. His voice was lower, flatter, and somehow worse. He said I needed to stop being emotional. He said the business did not run on feelings. He said the payment was not optional just because I was upset about a family misunderstanding. That phrase made me laugh once, but there was nothing funny in it. A family misunderstanding. As if everyone at that table had misunderstood my mother at the exact same time. As if my daughter had misunderstood the hand knocking hers away. As if children invent shame out of nowhere. Then my sister's messages came in one after another. You know how Mom is. She did not mean it like that. Lily is a kid. She will forget. You really picked the day after Christmas to punish Dad? I read that last one 3 times. There it was. The old family rule written in plain text. Their cruelty was always small. My reaction was always the problem. They were allowed to wound, and I was expected to manage the bleeding quietly so nobody else had to look at it. That afternoon, when I picked Lily up from school, I kept my phone on silent. She climbed into the car holding a paper snowflake she had made in class and asked if we could tape it to the kitchen window. I said yes. I said yes too quickly. Maybe because I wanted to give her something easy after a night where the adults had made everything hard. At home, we taped the snowflake up, made soup, and watched a movie she had already seen 20 times. She laughed at the same parts she always laughed at, but every time my phone buzzed against the counter, her eyes flicked toward it. That was when I understood something else my family had done. They had not only made her feel unwanted, they had made her afraid of what came next. After I tucked her into bed, I stood outside her room for a while, listening to her breathing settle. Then I went back to the kitchen and picked up my phone. There were more messages now. My mother had moved from hurt to anger. She said I was using my child as a weapon. My sister said I had always been too sensitive. My father sent only one sentence. If you do not make that payment tonight, we are all going to be dealing with consequences tomorrow. I stared at that message for a long time. He meant it as a threat. He wanted me to imagine vendor calls, late fees, family embarrassment, maybe even the business looking unstable. He wanted me to feel responsible for all of it. But something had changed in me the night before. A threat only works if the person receiving it still believes keeping everyone comfortable is worth betraying herself. I opened the thread and typed back, "Then consequences are overdue." The response did not come right away. 3 little dots appeared, vanished, appeared again, like my father was trying to decide whether to yell or guilt me first. Then my sister called. I almost ignored it. I had no interest in another lecture dressed up as concern, but when it rang a second time, then a third, something about the timing made me answer. She did not say hello. She said my name in a voice I barely recognized. "Vanessa, please do not hang up." I sat down slowly. She took a shaky breath, and for once, she did not sound like the daughter who knew how to survive by agreeing with our mother. She sounded scared. Then she said, "The loan is not what Dad told you." For a second, I thought I had heard her wrong. I asked her to repeat it. She did, quieter this time, and the room seemed to tilt around me. I looked toward the hallway where my daughter was sleeping, then back at the dark kitchen window. The cookie had been cruel. The laughter had been cruel. But the way my sister said that sentence told me the cookie was only the smallest thing they had taken from us. Brianna started talking fast, like if she slowed down she might lose the courage to tell the truth. She said she had only agreed to help Marjorie with online promotions for a new holiday styling side of the business because everyone said it would bring in extra money before wedding season picked up. The project had a name, Westbrook Signature Holiday Styling, and Marjorie treated it like she was building a luxury brand instead of a small seasonal service attached to an already struggling company. There were photo shoots, sample rooms, expensive floral displays, influencer dinners, custom linens, and boxes of decorative pieces that cost more than some people's rent. At first, Brianna thought the expenses were reckless but real. Then she saw charges that had nothing to do with clients: spa packages, boutique clothing, hotel weekends, jewelry, restaurant bills with no clients present. Gifts for her children, Avery and Miles, entered as promotional samples. A designer dollhouse labeled as a showroom display. A gaming console listed as a holiday giveaway that never happened. I closed my eyes when she said that. Not because I was shocked exactly, but because a part of me had already known the truth would be ugly. Brianna said she found the charges because Marjorie asked her to organize receipts before year end. Some files had been renamed, some were missing, some had little notes attached. Marketing content, client meeting, vendor deposit, seasonal display. But there were no clients for half of it, no signed contracts, no deposits coming in. Just money going out, dressed up in business language. I asked where my payments went. The line went quiet, and that silence answered before she did. Finally, she said Calvin had been using my monthly transfers to cover the gaps. He told me the company needed help with vendors and cash flow, but really, my money kept the books from showing how much Marjorie had been draining. He had not invented every lie, but he had protected them. He knew enough to stop it. He knew enough to tell me. Instead, he let me send money month after month because that was easier than standing up to his wife and admitting the family image was being held together with my bank account. I stood up because sitting still felt impossible. I walked to the sink, then to the table, then back to the window. Brianna kept apologizing, but every apology sounded tiny beside what she was describing. I thought about the school trip I told Lily we could not afford. I thought about the winter boots I waited to buy until they went on sale. I thought about bills I had paid in installments while telling myself that helping family was what good daughters did. And while I was doing all that, Marjorie was using company money for spa days and gifts for the grandchildren she was proud of. I asked Brianna why she was telling me now. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. Because last night I watched Mom humiliate Lily over a cookie. Then I listened to her talk about respect all morning, and I could not keep pretending anymore. I looked down the hallway toward Lily's room. My child was sleeping under a roof I paid for, in a life I built carefully, while my family treated her like an outsider and treated me like a payment system with a pulse. I told Brianna to send me everything: the screenshots, receipts, renamed files, emails, anything with dates, amounts, labels, or notes. She said if Marjorie found out, she would never forgive her. I told her Marjorie's forgiveness had become too expensive for all of us. 10 minutes later, attachments filled my phone. I opened one and saw my transfer listed 3 days before charges from a luxury department store. Another showed a hotel bill entered as a client consultation. Another showed custom Christmas stockings for Avery and Miles, labeled as sample decor. There was nothing for Lily. I printed every document I could. Page after page slid out, and with each one I felt less like a daughter begging to be believed and more like a mother building a case. By midnight, the folder was finished. I set it on the kitchen table and understood with perfect clarity that this was not just about Christmas dinner. It was about years of being trained to pay for my place in a family that still treated my child like she had not earned hers. The next afternoon, Marjorie came to my house with a gift bag big enough to hold an apology, if she had been the kind of woman who understood one. I saw her through the front window before she knocked. She stood on my porch in a cream coat, hair perfect, lipstick perfect, expression arranged into something soft enough for witnesses. In one hand, she held a glossy red bag. In the other, a tin of cookies. For a second, I just stared. It was almost impressive how she could bring the symbol of the injury and still think she was the generous one. I opened the door but kept my body in the doorway. She smiled immediately. "I brought something for Lily," she said. "I do not want her thinking Grandma is upset with her." The sentence landed so badly I almost laughed. Grandma was upset with her, as if my 7-year-old had caused a problem by bleeding where she had been cut. I did not move aside. Marjorie glanced over my shoulder, trying to see into the house. Lily was at the kitchen table coloring, far enough away that she could not see the porch, but close enough that I was not letting this woman take one step inside. "This is not a good time," I said. Her smile tightened. Vanessa, do not be dramatic. I came here to make peace. I looked at the gift bag, then the cookie tin. Peace would have started with an apology. She sighed like she was being patient with a difficult child. It was a joke. Everyone knows it was a joke. Lily did not know that. She is a child. Children get embarrassed over everything. She asked me if she was not one of the good ones. For the first time, Marjorie's face shifted. Not with guilt, with irritation. Like I had brought up a detail that made her position inconvenient. She lowered her voice. You should not encourage that kind of sensitivity. I asked calmly, why did you tell my daughter those cookies were for the grandchildren you were proud of? She looked away, then lifted her chin. Because children need to learn that not everything is for them. Some things are earned. There it was. Not confusion, not regret. She had meant the idea beneath the words. Some children were displayed, some were tolerated. Some learned early that love had a seating chart. I said, she reached for a cookie, not your bank account. Her eyes sharpened. Just a flicker, but I caught it. She understood I was not only talking about dessert anymore. What is that supposed to mean? She asked. I did not answer. Not on the porch, not with Lily inside. She tried another angle. She said I was ungrateful. She said she and Calvin had given me everything. She said families helped each other without keeping score. I thought about the folder on my kitchen table. My transfers, her receipts, spa packages, hotel weekends, gifts for Avery and Miles. Then I said, funny, for the last 2 years I am the one who has been giving. The color changed in her face, just slightly. She recovered fast, but not fast enough. Your father told you things in confidence, she said. No, I replied. Dad told me stories. I have records now. Her hand tightened around the cookie tin. For once, she had no immediate answer. I told her we would meet the next morning at Elaine Porter's office. Everyone in our family knew Elaine. She had handled the company books for years. Marjorie's mouth pressed into a thin line. You are taking private family matters to an accountant now? No, I said. I am taking company money to the person who understands company money. She stepped closer. You are making a mistake. I did not step back. No, I made the mistake every month I paid that loan without asking what kind of people I was protecting. Behind me, Lily laughed softly at something on her tablet, a small sound from a child who had no idea a war was happening at her front door. That sound steadied me. I told Marjorie to leave. Then I closed the door while she was still holding the gift bag. My hands shook afterward, but not from doubt. From rage, adrenaline, and the relief of finally watching her understand that this time, a pretty package and a guilt trip would not buy her way back inside. Elaine Porter's office sat above a small insurance agency on the edge of downtown, in a brick building that smelled like old paper, coffee, and winter coats. I arrived early because I wanted the seat facing the door. I wanted to watch them walk in. I wanted to remember I was not a frightened daughter being summoned. I was a grown woman who had paid too much, tolerated too much, and brought proof. The folder sat on my lap, heavier than paper should feel. Elaine came in first, calm and professional, carrying a yellow legal pad. She had known me since high school and had handled the company books for years. She did not ask why my hands were tight around the folder. She only asked if I wanted water. I said no. Calvin arrived next. He looked tired, not in the noble way he liked to perform when talking about responsibility, but like a man who had not slept because the problem he kept postponing had finally reached the door. Brianna came in behind him, pale and quiet. Marjorie entered last. Of course. She wore a dark green coat and carried herself like the meeting was an inconvenience she planned to correct quickly. Before anyone sat down, she said, I hope everyone understands how ridiculous this is. We are here because Vanessa decided to punish an entire family over a cookie. I opened the folder. No, we are here because you used company money for personal expenses. Dad covered it, and I was told my payments were saving the business. The room went quiet. Marjorie laughed once, sharp and humorless. That is an outrageous accusation. I handed Elaine the first stack. Transfers from my account, dates, amounts, messages from Calvin asking for payment before deadlines. Then the second stack. Receipts, charges, categories, marketing samples, client hospitality, seasonal display, vendor deposit. Elaine read silently. Calvin sat still. Brianna stared at the floor. Marjorie watched Elaine's face like she could intimidate the numbers into changing. Finally, Elaine removed her glasses and said carefully, "Several of these expenses would need documentation to be considered legitimate business costs. Some do not appear to have any business purpose based on what is here." Marjorie snapped, "You have not seen everything." Elaine said, "That is why an audit would be necessary." The word audit hit the room like a dropped plate. Marjorie turned on Brianna. "You gave her these?" Brianna flinched, but she did not fold. "You asked me to organize receipts. I saw what they were." "You had no right." "No," Brianna said, voice shaking. "I had no right to keep helping you hide it." For 1 second, Marjorie lost her balance socially. The room had not arranged itself around her. No one rushed to protect her from discomfort. That seemed to enrage her more than the evidence. She said the business required presentation. She said clients expected a certain image. She talked about reputation, sacrifice, stress, and loyalty, everything except the truth. When she finally stopped, I said, "You told my daughter she was not one of the grandchildren you were proud of, while using my money to buy gifts for the grandchildren you were." Calvin closed his eyes. Brianna looked like she might cry. Marjorie's face hardened. "Do not twist things." I pulled out the page with the custom Christmas gifts for Avery and Miles, categorized as seasonal display samples. Marjorie reached for it, but I pulled it back. "No, you do not get to take the evidence the way you took everything else." Calvin said my name quietly. I turned to him. "Do not use that voice with me, not today." He looked down, maybe understanding for the first time that being quiet had not made him innocent. It had only made him useful to her. I told them what would happen next. No more bridge loan transfers, no emergency help, no quiet deposits. If my name or money had been used in any way I had not agreed to, an attorney would review it. And Lily would not be near Marjorie again unless Marjorie apologized directly and admitted what she said was cruel. Marjorie leaned back. "I will not apologize to a child for teaching manners." That sentence settled over the table. There was no softening it now. Calvin looked at her for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, but it was different. "It was not manners, Marjorie. It was cruelty." She turned toward him, stunned. He did not look away. "And the spending stops today." He turned to Elaine. "Freeze her access to the company cards. Remove her from approval on discretionary spending. Start the audit." Elaine nodded and wrote it down. Marjorie stood, shaking with rage. "You will destroy this business without me." Calvin looked older than I had ever seen him, but he did not back down. "No. We almost destroyed it protecting you." Marjorie grabbed her purse and pointed at me, saying I would regret humiliating her, that I had poisoned everyone, that family did not recover from betrayal like this. I looked at her and said, "Then maybe you should not have betrayed us." She slammed the door behind her. I thought I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt clear. The kind of clear that comes when the person who hurt you finally stops pretending they did not mean to. The real consequences did not happen in one dramatic afternoon. They came slowly, through emails, frozen cards, canceled orders, closed accounts, and conversations my family had avoided for years. Calvin hired an outside auditor within the week. Elaine stayed involved, but he needed someone with no family history to go through everything without sympathy. The results were worse than Brianna had guessed. Personal expenses had been leaking through the business steadily, confidently, like Marjorie had mistaken access for ownership. The company had been paying for pieces of a life she wanted people to admire. Clothes, travel, gifts, staged photos, luxury samples that never became inventory. Dinners with no clients, hotel rooms with no meetings, and decorations that existed only long enough to appear in pictures. Calvin sold one storage unit first. Then he canceled the expensive display orders Marjorie had insisted were necessary for the brand. Then came the harder cuts. A smaller office, fewer seasonal events, no more vanity projects, no more blank checks disguised as business development. The company survived, but it became smaller, quieter, and much less impressive to people who only respected shine. Marjorie hated that most. She hated that people could see the shrinkage. She hated that relatives asked careful questions. She hated that Brianna stopped defending her. She hated that Derek made it clear his family's finances would not help clean up her mess. For years, Marjorie had built power on the idea that everyone needed her approval. Then, almost overnight, approval from her became less valuable than distance from her. Calvin moved into the guest room first. A month later, he moved into a short-term rental near the office. He did not announce a divorce immediately. He was too slow for that, too trained by decades of surrender. But he did begin the paperwork eventually, and when he told me, he did not ask me to comfort him. He said, "I should have stopped it long before it touched Lily." I told him yes, he should have. He nodded and accepted that without asking me to soften it. Marjorie never apologized. Not to me, not to Lily. She left one voicemail saying children were too sensitive now, another saying I had turned everyone against her, a third saying one comment at dinner should not cost a woman her family. I deleted all three, because it was never one comment. It was a lifetime of ranking people and calling it standards. It was cruelty wrapped in etiquette, control dressed as tradition, and this time I refused to let my daughter inherit it. About 6 weeks after Christmas, Calvin asked if he could come by and speak to Lily. I told him he could, but only if he understood this was not a performance and not a shortcut back into our lives. He arrived on a Sunday afternoon with a plain bakery box from a small shop near his apartment. No fancy ribbon, no luxury tin, no attempt to recreate the night everything went wrong. Just cookies, still warm enough that the box smelled like butter and sugar. Lily stood beside me, half curious and half careful. Calvin took off his coat, then lowered himself onto one knee so he was at her eye level. I had never seen him do that before. His voice shook when he started, but he did not look away. He told Lily what happened at Christmas was wrong. He told her he was sorry he stayed quiet. He told her no child should ever feel like love in a family had to be earned. Then he said, "You were never a bad granddaughter. You never have to earn love by being quiet." Lily listened with the serious face she gets when trying to understand grown-up pain. Then she looked at the box and asked, "Are those cookies for me too?" Calvin swallowed hard. "They are especially for you." She opened the box and picked the one with the most frosting. I had to turn away because tears were coming, and I did not want Calvin to mistake my tears for forgiveness. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way he wanted. But it was honest, and honest was more than my family had given us in a long time. After he left, Lily asked if Grandma was still mad. I told her some people get angry when they are asked to be kind because kindness feels like losing to them. She thought about that and said, "That is sad." She was right. It was sad, but it was not ours to fix. Family should not be a place where children learn to shrink. Love should not feel like a prize for the quietest child, the prettiest child, the most useful child, or the child who makes adults look good. Real love is safe. Real love protects. Real love apologizes when it causes harm. And when someone calls cruelty a joke, education begins with naming it correctly. Valuable knowledge is not always found in classrooms or books. Sometimes it begins at a dinner table, when a child reaches for a cookie and a mother finally understands that keeping the peace can cost too much. I used to think walking away from family meant breaking something sacred. Now I know that sometimes walking away is how you protect what is sacred. Lily remembers that Christmas dinner, but not as the night she was rejected. She remembers it as the night I stood up, put her coat around her shoulders, and chose her without asking permission. And if she remembers nothing else from me, I hope she remembers this. She never has to stay at a table where love comes with humiliation. At Revenge Broken Trust, our team is working hard to create meaningful, emotional, and well-written stories that leave a lasting impact. This is a fictional story created for entertainment and educational purposes, with the goal of sharing valuable lessons through powerful storytelling. This script carries an important educational message about self-respect, healthy boundaries, and protecting children from emotional harm. It reminds viewers that cruelty should never be excused as a joke, and that real family love must be built on kindness, accountability, and emotional safety. Through this story, audiences can gain valuable knowledge about courage, responsibility, and choosing what is right over what is comfortable.